ask ourselves, why do people immigrate to the US? Why do they leave everything behind? And the number one reason they leave, and statistics shows us that the number one reason they leave is because of the corrupt governments that have impoverished the countries, but also maybe in the last 10, 20 years have created safety hazards. Give you a good example. Let's take, for instance, Venezuela and Ecuador. As we know, Ecuador, or for those that don't know, Ecuador is turning into almost a narco-state. And this is due to the evolution of corruption. The fact that the citizens didn't have the bravery to stand up to these corrupt governments and ask and manifest their discontent for a reform. This also promoted gang violence. And these gangs evolve into welcoming the narcos to come and be participant and also sponsor these gangs. Later, they became affiliated, and now they're their major ally for transporting drugs. In Ecuador, you can see this from, and I can tell you this. I lived in Ecuador when I was during my youth, and during the 80s, you could see the corrupt system. And the culture was they did one good deed, but yet they knew that they were robbing, and they allow this. And what happens with that is that the system keeps corrupting itself. Judges, executives, congressmen, senators, the whole Congress works for bribery. So think about this. If you are an Ecuadorian citizen, how can you trust in your law system if you know that you've been robbed and the thief has more money to bribe the judge and get away with the crime, or even be sentenced but pays the judge to be released in a week or two? How can you trust a government? Wouldn't you be afraid that now that you did the right thing, denouncing the crime, and now the person gets out in a week or two and he and his gang members are going to come get you? Wouldn't you want to run away from that terror? So think about it. The choice of an immigrant is very simple. It's between the predictable terror of a corrupt government, gang violence, or even economic collapse. I remember when Ecuador went, the sucre got devaluated to the point where $1 was 25,000 sucres. The government, instead of warning their citizens so they can trade the money and not lose as much, didn't do this. They did it abruptly. Many people that had sucres in their bank now only had a few dollars. This is life changing. Think about like what that caused for people to immigrate. There was a large migration to Europe because of this, because of the government not thinking about their citizens. So to think about this, which one will you choose? To immigrate to a country you don't know, or stay in an unstable place that guarantees you absolutely nothing? But at least if you immigrate to Europe or the United States, there is hope. There is a possibility. There's a chance that you can not only survive, but make a dignified living. And it just doesn't stop there. We have to think about the high-ranking officials of the country that have to face justice, and instead they fled to another country and seek refugee. I can give you examples of that. The economist Albert Dahit, back in the 90s, he was accused of embezzling millions of dollars in state secret funds. You also have former Vice President Jorge Glass, convicted in the massive Odebrecht bribery scheme while residing abroad. These people don't only reside in these different countries, they also look for the refugee in the embassies, creating a political, social chaos for the country. The judicial system also implicated figures like Rolando Panchana, that used to be a journalist for Ecuavisa and got involved in politics based on his popularity. And let me tell you, the list goes on, because corruption in places like Ecuador evolves, and it evolves brilliantly without any repercussions or minimum repercussion, because if you have the money, you can definitely pay your way out. The elite exile is the ultimate betrayal tool. Leaders strip the state out of its resources, unstabilizing the country, not only from a monetary system, but also in trust and transparency. And when held accountable, they abandon the citizens, they impoverish. But now we see a different kind of evolution in Ecuador. Crucially, the corruption under administrations like Rafael Correa and Jorge Glass that we just mentioned, is directly linked by prosecutors to the rise of the narco-state. Allegations suggest massive state contracts and infrastructure were infiltrated by drug cartel financing and influence. This is the blueprint of becoming a narco-state, and also paves the way for organized crime to have political control. This corruption was catastrophic for the Ecuadorian citizens. It created a made-out migration, a moral imperative for parents seeking their children's safety and their own safety. Let's look at the statistics in 2023. Ecuador's murder rate hit a record high of approximately 45 people being murdered out of 100,000 people, a dramatic increase that directly correlated with emigration rates. So safety plays a huge role why people leave their country. And if we're going to talk about the corruption in Ecuador, why not talk about Venezuela as a great example too? I remember when in the 70s, 80s, Venezuela was the utopian country for South America, blemishing an economy due to their oil industry. I remember they used to have the best soap operas. They used to do movies. They had the best singers. They were involved in art. Europeans used to come and reside in Venezuela. They were known as America's financial heaven due to their oil wealth. But what happened? Corruption, corrupted leaders with a socialist mindset. But more importantly, it's not even about the left or the right. It's all these Machiavellian behaviors you see in them, narcissists, dictators that changed everything from a once blemishing country to the catastrophic collapse under Chavez and Maduro. They're marked by state corruption, hyperinflation, and resource starvation. I remember seeing and talking to people from Venezuela, and they couldn't even buy toilet paper, the basic needs of everyday, like toothpaste, food, water. Who does this to their own citizens? Think about that. Think about the psychological toll if you were a Venezuelan citizen. This resulted in one of the largest refugee crises in modern history. I can't believe this is happening in 2024, 2025. This is a clear case where systematic political and economic corruption directly reversed a national dream, and it destroys a culture. It destroys what you once felt that was yours, where you belong, forcing millions to flee the poverty and the lack of basic services. It is sad to see and to listen to some of the stories people from Venezuela have, and also the dream they have that one day they're able to go back and reform and restructure and bring Venezuela to what it was one day, the Americans' heaven, or I would say the American financial heaven it once was, where everyone wants to migrate. But now we are seeing the bad examples of why people leave their country. They obviously don't leave just because they just got up and say, well, I just want to go up north, or I just want to, jump to Europe. Because I will give you two examples of economies that are and countries that are doing the right thing. They're fighting corruption. They're trying to maintain a economic stabilization where investment can come to their country, because let's be honest, if there's no safety, why will you invest? Would you want to put money in places like Ecuador and Venezuela where nothing is safe, where if you own a business, you might get vaccinated? That's what they call it in Ecuador, where the narcs or the gangs, they come to you, to your establishment, and they say, well, you got to pay me $5,000 every month in order for you to continue to operate, and you will get our protection. That is the cruel reality these countries are living through. But let's talk about Bukele and El Salvador. Let's think about what he inherited. Years of crippling insecurity led to massive out-migration. Now with the dramatic and yet for many controversial security measures under President Bukele, some Salvadorans are returning home after many years of living in the U.S. And we should ask ourselves why. And the answer is very simple. One, they love their country. Wouldn't you go back if you knew everything was okay and you can put a business and survive and live with dignity? But also it's because the primary need for safety has finally been restored. Think about what in the US, we can walk wearing all the clothes that we buy and the brands that we buy without having the thought that somebody's going to mug us, that, we have to hide our phone because it's going to be snatched every single time we go out. That's the kind of safety that everyone wishes to have. This proves that policies can alter migration patterns, but the root cause of why people leave and they migrate to the United States and Europe is because there's a lack of safety, and financial stability plays a huge role. Because if you're a single father, a single mom, or you're a family and you don't know, and you don't have a job, and you don't know how you're going to feed your kids the next day, what will you do? Put yourself in those shoes. I'm not asking you to change your mind about what you believe. What I'm asking is put yourself in those shoes. If you were here in the United States and you didn't have any money and there was no work around, and every day around your neighborhood you see that you're being threatened, you're being sabotaged, what will you do? Let me know what you think. Leave a comment. Tell me what you think. What will you do? Will you do the same as people that come from these countries and immigrate to the United States? Or will you stay? Leave a comment. Tell me what you think.